Hey, Rusty! Let's rank some Bloodborne bosses, because that video topic hasn't been beaten, squeezed, and done to death in like 17 different editing styles by like 60 different creators already. No, this topic isn't oversaturated at all. Alas, I don't know, it looks like Bloodborne content is kind of in demand for me right now, so I don't know. And if I'm being completely transparent with you guys, I'm looking for excuses to keep playing this game instead of doing work. So, hey, guess what we're gonna do today? The following bosses are going to be ranked not by difficulty, but simply by good old-fashioned coolness. How fun the fights themselves are, how cool they look, etc. Okay, whatever. You already know why you're here. Let's just go. Mieke Lash, more like piece of trash. An elusive little twerp that seems to just not want anything to do with you. Yet you remain insistent on getting him to use his head as your convenient little axe holder. If putting a birdcage over your head and running around like an idiot, hopping through mirrors and dropping gates down on you doesn't scream, "I don't want to fight you," then Mieke Lash is either bad at giving hints, or you're honestly just a blood-crazed sociopath. This is less of a boss fight and more of a glorified tag simulator. Someone with the subtitle Host of Nightmares in their name sounds like they should be at least giving you more of a reason to fight them. Just don't back him up too tight in a corner, because after you've tagged him, aka triggered the second half of the fight, it is now his turn to tag you. And he makes sure to let you know he is no longer interested in being nice. All the difficult parts about this boss are just annoying and cheap. If he kills you, well, you suck because you just got your ass beat by a man with a laundry hamper on his head. And if you win, well, congratulations, you just beat the ass of someone wearing a laundry hamper on their head. Yeah, I don't like this boss fight. Not even slightly. Next up is Rom, the Vacuous Spider, and her name, very unlike the former boss, is actually 1000% appropriate, considering this boss is about as dense as the boulder she's pretending to be when you find her. You aren't actually fighting Rom here. Half the time you're either dodging around cosmic asteroids that, for whatever reason, have tracking abilities, because we all know how technologically advanced fucking rocks are, and the other half of the time you're preoccupied with dancing around one of the many spider mosh pits she's just dropped on you. I just don't like this boss. I don't know. I don't like spiders. I don't like the word Rom. I don't like how the word sounds. I don't like the surprising amount of effort it takes to say her name during voiceovers. I don't like that her face switching gotcha moment is just teleporting 10 feet somewhere in a random direction. It's about as uneventful as a boss as I can think of. Like, it actually just feels like you're fighting a sentient boulder with a bunch of smaller, less sentient boulders that attack you by headbutting the ground and poking you to death. And somehow that actually ends up killing you. At number 20 is the Witches of Heimer. If fighting a giant rock doesn't sound that palatable to you, then maybe you should try fighting a pair of invisible rocks that move slower than ass and summon from the ground mad imps with sickles that are just bound and determined to not stagger, like ever. The Witches of Heimer, if you're a new player, are just straight up confusing. The fight lures you into thinking this imp spawning in the middle of the area is actually the boss because, well, why the hell wouldn't you think that? At which point 4 more spawn in with their own health bars, and it's only then that it clicks with you that maybe you should be doing something else. Simply put, you find the witches by actively avoiding the thing the game wants you to attack, because that makes a ton of goddamn sense. Unless you just luck out, and one of the witches are stupid enough to gleam forth their shiny magic balls that might as well be a giant picket sign that reads, "Stab me." Wait, what? I'm attacking the boss, but her health isn't going down. Wait, I killed her, but the fight isn't over. What's going on? Oh, right, witches. There's 2 of them. Well, alright then. Next is Living Failures. Yeah, I know. I didn't feel like spoiling the surprise for you guys or anything, but I did lots of work for FromSoft in 2015, and they deemed it fit to monumentalize me by dedicating a boss fight to all my contributions. Please don't subscribe to me. Anyways, the Living Failures look to be about as living as this chair I'm sitting in, and they fail immensely for the most part in being an enjoyable fight, ha ha ha. It's one of those collective hive mind bastards where the boss HP gauge is comprised of the many smaller health bars of the various enemies. Do enough damage to enough dudes and you win. Simple. I wasn't exactly sure how to tackle this thing at first. Honestly, a lot of the surprises this boss fight has was less of a wow factor and more of a "are you fucking kidding me, what the hell just killed me" sort of factor. They don't really look like much, they're just deformed extraterrestrials that got their heads caught in a giant waffle maker. Just don't make the mistake of underestimating them like I did, because if you play passive and allow their little Lovecraftian book club to congregate in the middle of the garden, they'll just take you to space and throw you into the biggest asteroid field they can find. Unless you hide behind this conveniently placed tree right in the middle of the garden, because, you know, that's something that would save you. Okay, I have to ask, what is it with this game and rocks, dude? The One Reborn makes me question a lot of things in life. Things like, how did those bodies get stuck together in such a weird and off-putting fashion? Why are there legs on the sides of this creature that don't seem to do anything important? What chaotic, evil bastard in this vengeful cosmos looked at this thing, watched it die, and then decided, hey guys, you know what would just be the funniest meme ever? You know what would make everyone happy? Let's just bring this ugly motherfucker right back to life. Everyone's favorite undead mass is also assisted by a cohort of red chime maidens that heal him up whenever you wound him, as if having the appetizer from SpongeBob just crawl out of the sky wasn't enough motivation to get off your ass. He's weak to pretty much every damage that isn't arcane, so just about anything in the purchasable inventory would be of great benefit to you. But if I'm being honest, you probably don't even need any of that to take him down. The most common combat strategy is just about the exact same for every other gigantic Bloodborne blob boss. Locate the ass, slap it a few times, back up when he starts charging the good old AoE, and then close in once again. And by the looks of this dude's character design, actually finding said ass might be the hardest step in that sequence. Next up is the Celestial Emissary. If you were confused in trying to dodge in between all the blue ball sacks swatting at you while looking out for the boss, then I honestly couldn't fault you for that. It took me more than enough time to even register that one of these sentient party inflatables was actually the boss in which I was supposed to kill. And once I figured that out, the ensuing fight was about as easy as your mom. Chop him up enough and he'll enter a second phase where, just like any other Bloodborne cosmic entity, he'll grow 4 times his size, sprout some jellyfish tentacles from his brain, and start shoving space lasers up your ass. His first and second phases, respectively, are just a regular-sized mob and a super-sized me version of a completely different mob. This boss is definitely the least creative in the game, in my opinion, at least in terms of design, but I wouldn't say it's completely boring. I don't know, it's kinda cathartic slapping around the lesser dudes and watching their heads bounce around like water balloons. But no, it's pretty easy. If it takes you more than 2 minutes to take him down, you're probably doing something wrong. Despite being somewhat in the lower middle section of the list, the Shadows of Yharnam boss fight I would probably say is the least memorable. It's just a trio of dudes that 6 or so locations later become just regular ass enemies you have to kill on your way to another boss, only without all the giant serpents coming from out of the ground to bite you in half. And that's another thing. The things about this fight that are difficult were excruciatingly difficult for me. Like put the controller down and take a lunch break sort of difficult. It's just exhausting in how much attention it demands from you. I don't know if I'm just not good at multitasking or what, but this dude just kicked my ass over and over again. Each shadow has his own preferred fighting style. One is melee, one is ranged, and one is kind of both, but not really. Ideally, you'd want to attack the ranged guy and erase him from the picture as soon as you're able, but that's hard for me to do, maybe because, I don't know, I just suck ass at boss fights with more than one target. Because exacerbating the weaknesses of one guy is usually just opening a window for someone else to come and take you to butt-fuck alley. So if you aren't good at multitasking, this fight is not going to feel that fun to you at all. It feels like the only way to just really own this fight is to micromanage every little thing that all 3 of them are doing at all times, which is just exhausting. It doesn't feel fun, it doesn't feel like there's a huge payoff or anything at the end, but god damn it, do you feel like a badass when you parry these Slytherin house rejects and slice their health bar in half. There's nothing really too exciting about a dude with an axe. Father Gascoigne has been thought of as one of Bloodborne's first brick-walled bosses that a lot of players unfamiliar with what they're getting into simply just can't best him. I, on the other hand, knew exactly what I was getting into, and I still got my ass flattened the first time. Father Gascoigne's fight begins with him instantly running at you with a giant axe, leaving you little time to scoop your tongue up from the floor after you've attempted to pronounce his name correctly. But for the first 2 phases, the fight offers little in terms of extravagance. All you're really doing is getting your shit kicked in by a dude who is bigger and somehow faster than you. And don't worry, that theme becomes pretty prevalent the later down the road you get. And just when the fight gets about as boring and as readable as possible, the game takes a left turn into Van Helsing land and Father Gasoline ditches his axe and just boom, just giant werewolf out of fucking nowhere. Nope, you're fighting this now. Sorry. The Bloodstarved Beast is both the next boss on this list and technically also the next boss in this game's recommended sequence of progression. Some people think this fight is fun. I very much do not. First off, this is a boss that, for whatever reason, the game goes out of its way to hype up and then introduce. I mean, look at this. A massive open dirt road climactically leading up to an old and derelict cathedral. There's a very obvious build up here, you know? You can tell before you even step in that whatever's crawling around in there is currently preparing to fuck you to twice. And as you approach the inevitable boss, the beginning of the fight is signaled by what sounds like an entire Philharmonic orchestra kicking their instruments down the stairs all at the same time. The battle with this thing has always felt really inconsistent in its difficulty to me. His first phase might as well be a pinata beating simulator because of how slowly and how passively he moves around you. Then his second phase comes in, which is like a pinata beating simulator if that pinata had small thorns on it that prevented you from getting close to it and just completely annihilating it, because that just wouldn't be fair. And then in the final phase, just out of nowhere, it turns out that pinata you were smacking around sprouts legs, claws, feelers, starts vomiting everywhere, and oh, now you're dead. I will say this thing does look pretty cool though. These monsters are supposed to be ugly and grotesque and everything. You know, that's kind of the theme with Bloodborne. And the Bloodstarved Beast looks like he sneezed so hard that the air pressure voided the skin of his ass cheeks through his face. So, I don't know, they nailed that part at least. Next up is the Cleric Beast. Now, in the grand scheme, the very first optional boss in the game really doesn't seem to have that big of a bark compared to some of the nightmares you find in the end game. Honestly, in comparison to most of these dudes on here, I'd be half tempted to knock this fella down a few ranks, but I don't know, I just kinda like this boss fight. It's a nice opening act sort of boss that sets the pace of the rest of the game quite nicely. It's not the most extravagant boss in the world, and it's certainly not the hardest, but the Cleric Beast is a nice introduction to the game that lets you know you're in for some weird shit later on. The Cleric Beast, after all, looks like a snuggly teddy bear when you compare him to the likes of the One Reborn, for instance, packing around at least 27 more appendages than he actually needs. But a giant, feathery, dinosaur-looking bastard with antlers is more than enough for any Bloodborne virgin to look at and go, wow, that's fucked up, without even having an iota of a clue what they're in for as they continue through Yharnam and discover some of the more unappealing monstrosities. The Cleric Beast is kind of a wimp, but he's a deliberate wimp. He's a wimp with just the right amount of ew in his look to get you prepared for the rest of what's to come. Doing battle with the Moon Presence, an optional boss fight against one of Bloodborne's cosmic gods known as the Great Ones, means you're well on your way to discovering Bloodborne's true and final ending. Just in summary here, I feel like the Moon Presence is one of those final bosses where looking cool and cinematic takes priority over actually being hard to fight, which is, you know, that's perfectly fine. That's just not the kind of boss I'd expect to be the true ending's last line of defense, so to speak. It's easy to be intimidated by her attacks because they aren't anything like you've seen before, but they stop making any sense if you just think about them for more than 3 seconds. She has an arena-sized AoE that reduces you to exactly 1 point of health, but it staggers herself in the process, giving you time to pop a couple blood vials and nullify the move completely. And she also has a blood splatter ability that suppresses your healing, which, I don't know, that would be a pretty scary move if her jump attacks and signature 3-hit melee took even a semblance of effort to dodge around. In short, the Moon Presence is kind of a fun fight, I guess, but it's the final boss of the game, so I almost feel like I'm missing out on something by not getting my ass kicked. Next up is Vicar Amelia, whom I deem to be the first actual oh shit boss in the game. A lot of players attribute this title to Father Gascoigne, especially with his final phase going all Mr. Hyde on your ass, and where I can definitely see why Frozen Gelatin is the reason 90% quit the game so early in, Vicar Amelia is a boss fight that really dives deep on what Bloodborne expects from its players. It's a grand fight against the largest boss you've faced, with also the largest health pool of any boss you've faced thus far. Additionally, she has a self-heal ability that can be suppressed only with an item in which you need to find somewhere in the ward, which is the numbing mist. And you need to actually find it. Like, you can't just drive to your local Bloodborne 7-Eleven and catch this shit on a 2-for-1 special. Like, you have to look around for it. And looking around is one of the most critical elements of how playing Bloodborne, or I don't know, I guess any Souls game, works. There's also a couple paths that diverge away from this fight, both of which lead to Bloodstone upgrades that you will very much need on your weapons if you want this fight to take any less than 10 minutes. And because of this, I would argue that Vicar Amelia is the first fight that overtly encourages exploration, and therefore Bloodborne's first real fight that gets you fully immersed in its gameplay, which is why I placed this fight directly in the middle, because she isn't really that boring nor that exciting. She's just necessary. So, now that we've cleared out the first half of the list, here is where the boss fights begin to... What the hell? Wait, what is that? Oh no. Oh god, it's an ad. Fuck. No, wait, I'm not done. Get out. Well, I sure hope an ad just played there, because if not, then Rusty just done made a damn fool of himself. Anyway, let's just go. And thus, we beat on to the second half of the list, where the boss fights, in my opinion, actually get really exciting. Murr's WetNurse waits for you atop the nightmare castle of death and despair and whatever the hell these things are. Murr's WetNurse is demented and fucked up for many reasons. Not only does the game savagely lure you into thinking you're about to fight an infant, only before revealing that you're actually about to fight something much goddamn worse, but the entire fight has the soundtrack of a music box in the background, which you can actually hear in central Yharnam towards the start of the game. The whole fight is cocked up in the head, and I absolutely love it. Murr's WetNurse, and you'll start to see this as a theme for the remaining bosses on this list, has some really cool fuck you in the ass attacks, but none of which are honestly that hard to avoid as long as you're paying attention. At a point in time, the nurse will spawn a doppelganger and begin attacking you with a clone of herself. And if you can time dodges right, it just feels like the greatest shit in the world. Watching her charge up that 6-blade attack and then just stepping out of the way at the critical moment is euphoria with a capital P. Martyr Ligarius of Cainhurst Castle is definitely one of the most relentless boss fights in the game, but also one of the most enjoyable in my opinion. There's no real cheese strategy here. Mopping the floor with Ligarius is an accomplishment you just have to put in the hours for. His first phase is challenging enough with him throwing his weird red scream magic at you, but his second phase is just balls to the wall kill you mode. He actually becomes Cainhurst Jesus. He's flying around like a pterodactyl, clearing the entire arena with a single bound. He's pulling out swords and shit. It's just a really energetic fight that demands just enough of your attention to feel satisfying without it feeling overly cheap. Don't get me wrong, Ligarius is still one of the hardest assholes in the game, but none of his attacks feel scummy or intentionally designed to dick you over. If you die to Ligarius, you often know why you died. Maybe there was an attack you just didn't see coming, or maybe that final scythe swing took just a second longer than you thought it was going to, and despite your best efforts to dodge it, it still just ended up catching you right in the neck. If Get Good was a boss, this dude would be it. No strategy, no cheese, you just win by becoming a badass. Lawrence, the First Vicar, is the one optional boss of the DLC that you actually have to go out of your way to trigger, and it's for this reason why I've placed him lower than most of the DLC bosses with the exception of the Living Meatheads, because it suffers from what I'm just gonna call Moon Presence Syndrome, where the work and thought requirement to even get to the boss seems to almost outweigh the excitement of fighting and defeating the boss itself. The only one big payoff here is really just, oh shit, you get to fight Lawrence! And then after about 10 seconds of seeing his second phase, that sentiment turns remorseful really quickly, and oh shit, I get to fight Lawrence suddenly becomes, ah shit. I have to fight Lawrence? He fools you into underestimating him by thinking he's just a souped-up Cleric Beast with flashy fire effects. But all that changes on a dime where his second phase swoops in and his legs explode. Nope, not even memeing, not making that up, like both his legs decided to give up and they just fucking explode. And somehow this makes him tougher. Now he has 50% of the limbs he used to, while also being 50% more of a pain in the ass. Because now he vomits pools of lava and he has a stun-locking ground pound combo that only ends whenever the hell he wants it to, because he's fuck mothering Lawrence and you're gonna do what he goddamn tells you to. The Amygdala battle is technically the first of the endgame bosses. The frat party of giant bug heads you see chilling out, climbing on buildings and crap since Yahar Ghul have been keeping a steady eye or 12 on you. And when you start bolting it towards this building here that's obviously only there for the debate, this amygdala in particular decides that it's time for your initiation process. Now, the game has been hyping these enemies up for a long damn time, and ever since you first got introduced to them, you just knew in the back of your head that at some point you were going to end up fighting one. And now that time has arrived, so this alien movie reject better be laying down some pro gamer moves on my ass. Problem is, depending on what build you've been rolling out with, this fight can actually go pretty quickly. I mean like super ultra mega dumb quick, like using a compass to draw straight lines kind of dumb. His attacks are pretty obviously choreographed, and every now and then he'll invite you inwards to strike his equally obvious weak spot, which just so happens to be his massive dumbass head. And you usually only have time to get in one hit before he rises back up, which means if you have a strength build or some other build that can quickly deal massive damage in one hit, that only means less times you'll have to run through that cycle. Honestly, I don't even know what he's doing so high up in this Did that bitch just rip his own damn arms off? Okay, never mind. That's kind of badass. Next up is Darkbeast Parle, probably Bloodborne's most divisive boss battle ever. Every Souls game has that boss, you know? What was a cakewalk for one player always seems to be the largest thorn in the side of another. And for Bloodborne, that's Dr. Parle over here. He's a big shock boy with melee combos for days. In his spare time, the Darkbeast enjoys long walks on the beach and jumping around everywhere to cock over the player's lock-on reticle and then laughing hysterically, while said player is busy dislodging their head from their ass. This fight may be difficult to some players, but that's never bothered me too much about this fight because the whole premise of it just feels fun. I don't know, there's something awesome about stubbing your toe on a large pile of debris and then watching that pile of debris transform into a fucking dinosaur ready to chew your face off because you disturbed his nap. I think he's just challenging enough, you know? He's close to in-game boss territory, so Miyazaki ain't finna go easy on your ass, but it offers some decent enough attack windows that you have to work for to take advantage of. I've always thought it to be a really engaging fight. I also just kinda think Bloodborne uses this boss to flex its level design a little, cause there's nothing cooler in a Souls game than felling a giant monster and opening the door he was blocking to arrive at the ass end of a level you already picked through like 8 hours ago. And then you spend the next 10 minutes giving yourself a headache trying to map out where all the other areas could be in relation to each other. And it's just, look, it's a cool fight is what I'm saying, alright? And here we find ourselves at the entryway to the final 5. These remaining fights are they're just awesome. These guys are the prime reasons why I always wished Bloodborne could have put in some sort of boss rush mode. And no, the Chalice dungeons don't count. Let's start the remaining top 5 with a dude that literally feigns a fucking physical disability just to lure you into not taking him seriously. When I was at my first in-game run, I knew I had the option to either fight him or just simply accept my own death. And when I chose to fight him and then saw him just stand his ass up like it wasn't no thing, I legitimately thought I chose the bad ending. That's how intimidating this dude's reveal is. And then after I chose the other ending, I realized he just stood up either way. So the game wants to throw you this curveball. FromSoft knows how to make a damn great villain, and they want to make sure you know it. It's just two old geezers duking it out in a no-holds-barred, balls-out, blade-slinging fight to the absolute death. He's just as tough as he needs to be for a final fight, and honestly, I think the biggest reason why the Moon Presence felt so underwhelming is only because it's sharing the stage with this old fart. In summary, Gehrman Express delivers to you a jumbo, extra-large, big gulp, super-size-me ass-kicking with a side of French toast, and he looks tougher than nails doing it too. The Orphan of Cause is it's scary. It's frickin' friggity-frackin' scary, man. The final encounter in the Hunter's DLC is a dark reminder of Bloodborne's nihilistic, no hope and everything is terrible approach to storytelling. There's no build-up, no climax, no righteous payoff that ends the story on a good note. No, sir, the only thing you're finding at the end of this rainbow is a sobbing, grinning fish face crawling out of his mother's corpse and kicking the shit out of you with his own massive placenta. And you poke him around for a couple minutes until he finally tugs his balls and enters his second phase. Everything from lightning strikes to exploding organs to self-disfigurement, all in the effort of proving a point that you don't mess with this dude's family. The Orphan of Cause means business, and to him, business is serving up quality, unforgettable stomps to your character, all while singing to you the song of his people. You just don't fuck with this guy. You just don't do it. The in-game boss of the Hunter's DLC was not what anyone expected, and it's honestly a turn that no one without any knowledge of the lore really saw coming. It never once occurred to people that this infamous and all-powerful cause we kept hearing about was just a giant slug that washed up on the ocean. Everything about this fight is just sour and depressing, and I absolutely love it. This fight, on the other hand, has very little surprises. No placentas, no fish, no self-mutilation. Well, okay, maybe a little bit of self-mutilation. Lady Maria guards your approach to the Astral Clock Tower, and it's pretty obvious that she would sooner bend over backwards and literally hand you her ass than let you through to that hamlet on the other side. A corpse should be well left alone, teases Maria. It only makes that much more sense when you realize that Maria was, at some point, trained by Gehrman, because you can definitely see some overlap in their fighting style. Well, you know, you can see that in the first phase at least. Things kind of get weird when she shish kebabs herself and starts flinging her own life juice at you. But oh, hey, look, her blood is on fire. That's pretty neat. If you were only alive to see it. So let's all get in the bus and take a class field trip to Perry City, because if you have a firearm that's any faster of a draw than a cannon, then you're probably going to enjoy this fight a lot more than most others have that played this DLC. Ebritas might actually be one of the coolest bosses ever. On top of being completely optional, she's also pretty well hidden in the upper cathedral ward area. Not only do you have to slice and hack your way through interstellar space gremlins just to even get to her and know she exists, but the player also has to brave the even more mentally arduous task of somehow finding out that this window right here can be broken. Like, no shit, this took me 10 minutes and you can imagine how stricken with boredom I was to just start vandalizing windows. Funnily enough, this actually falls in congruence with a Lovecraftian short story named Haunter of the Dark that specifies going through a window to reach this primordial evil being. So I can't even complain about how cryptic it is to even get to the boss, because it still makes sense. This thing is scary as hell. It's creepy, its wings look badass, and the music score was written and composed by God himself. Much like your mom, she's weak to thrusting damage, and as intimidating as she looks, most problems in Bloodborne can be solved with a giant cannonball to the face. And Ebritas is no different. Blaster in the head, come in for a visceral, feel like a goddamn king. Space lasers. Just couldn't do without those. Just, holy shit. Okay, come on, be honest. This shouldn't come as a surprise. Ludwig is the bar none, be-all, end-all boss fight to me in Bloodborne. A fight with a transitional cutscene so awesome that it's responsible for react videos and montages all across YouTube itself. It reveals an awesome second phase, awesome lore, and one of the most badass trademark Souls weapons ever, all at once. Just literally just throwing all that shit at you in the course of like 15 seconds. The whole second phase is just a massive Shyamalan curveball that no one could ever see coming. Ludwig introduces himself to you as an insane horse. He looks like your rickety old great-grandfather with twice the mental decay. He seems to favor the ancient fighting strategy of, if I don't know what the hell I'm doing, then you sure as shit don't. If Ludwig were a person in real life, he would have developed Alzheimer's and suffered from turbo dementia before he even graduated college. He's one grotesque motherfucker. But serve his ass up in the first half of the fight, and Ludwig has a top 10 character redemptions moment by just finding his sentience out of nowhere, unsheathing his gleaming blue Souls patented anime buttfuck sword, and sweeping your ass out the front door like a stray kitten. Even the name above his health bar changes to something completely different, and I'm pretty sure that's never happened with any other boss in the game. His second phase chooses from a garden variety of melee and AoE attacks that are quite honestly cheaper than gas station Funyuns, but because he looks like such a renegade hard ass while doing it, such cheapness is easily forgiven. In fact, one particular AoE he has is a two-phase attack with a fake-out sort of air blast that does negligible damage and knockback, and phase 2, the attack in which I've codenamed the Gotcha Bitch phase, is just this massive, cone-shaped, extra-large, double-decker, fuck you sideways with a bag over your head freight train of a moonbeam with an atom bomb-sized reach that looks so cool it practically dares you to get mad if and when you die to it. Ludwig has an in-game reputation for being the toughest of the tough, and this boss fight does his name more than enough justice in my opinion. It's an exemplary demonstration of taking things from 0 to 100 in the bat of an eye. Guys, just whatever you did with this boss fight, holy shit, just do it again. Please, do it again. Yeah, I didn't want to include Chalice dungeon bosses on here because they're all either regular mobs in the base game or souped up versions of what's already on here, with the exception of, I don't know, like 4? So I figured if people wanted, I would just make that a separate list in the future. These bosses were not ranked by difficulty, weight, health, character design, or basically anything that's completely objective. But feel free to tell me how wrong I am about Parle because, well, I know that one's coming. Thanks for tuning into The Forge, I'm Rusty, I'll see you in the next video. Bye, I guess. Fucking get out of here.